Hello and welcome to another episode of the Highlights Podcast. We are your host for this episode, Chase Green and Caleb Rutherford. And today we have a special guest, Gage Coldwater, who would like to highlight his mission work known as the Manna Project. Gage is with us at a lectureship in Marietta, Oklahoma, so we're taking this opportunity to record this week. And Gage, it's good to have you on the podcast with us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We hope that this will shine a good light on the work that you're doing. I know that this is a very important work, and there's a lot of different tenets of this work, I guess. You've got a lot of different places that this is being done, but we'll get to that. But before we do that, Gage, would you kind of introduce yourself to our audience?
So I'm Gage Coldwater, as you've already mentioned, but I grew up in Oklahoma, attended the Memphis School of Preaching, graduated there in 2006, and I've preached in Tennessee and Oklahoma, Texas, and been doing mission work since 2010 all over the world. Been blessed to be able to travel, blessed to have my wife, Kelly. Been married almost 20 years now, and two teenagers, Pike and Aurora. Aurora's 17 and Pike is 15. And I preach currently at the Wewoka Church of Christ in Wewoka, Oklahoma.
Gage is a good guy. I really appreciate Gage. Met him when he was doing a little ranching in Thackerville, which is just south of us in Marietta. And I told this in the lectureship earlier, but Gage had me building some fence one time with him. And it really took me back to my high school days working in ranching / horses and hay fields and those sorts of things. That's hard work. It'll make a man out of you. And Gage, you put me to work that day, and I kind of enjoyed it, actually.
It'll either make a man out of you or kill you. That's
one
of the two options.
Right. But that was a enjoyable change of pace for me, and it's been good to get to know you over the last year or so, and appreciate your work very, very much. And we've been up to Wewoka as well, and very nice folks there, and your work there speaks well of you. So appreciate you.
There.
Yes, sir. We appreciate you joining us for this episode of Highlights. So, Gage, the Manna Project. What exactly is the Manna Project, and can you tell us where all this is located?
Okay, so Manna Project is really it's a mission work with the ultimate goal of trying to reach the world with the gospel of Jesus Christ. But what we try to do is we achieve this by training men to preach, but then equipping those men to preach to go back to their villages. Most of the time, these guys are in villages that can't be, the villages aren't able to support them as preachers. So if they're going to go back, they're going to have to be self-supported. And we try to equip them with the skill set when they go back to those villages where they can, most of the time, grow their own food. So the world, as we know it in the United States, is kind of flipped on its head from the rest of the world, specifically like third world countries. So in like a third world country, about 90% of a person's budget would go towards food. As in America, the opposite. We spend about 10% of our monthly budget on food. Well, so if you can teach somebody to grow their own food, they can deal with a major portion of their budget just by doing such a simple thing as being able to grow a garden, raise chickens, maybe raise some rabbits or goats or pigs for meat. And so we train them so they come to maybe one of our preaching schools, and they will be trained for 2 years. But while they're there, we have a school farm that trains them and educates them in how to do that when they go back. And then when they graduate, we usually buy them maybe like a goat or two to get them started, give them a bunch of seeds, maybe some plants that they have started already at the school, just as a jump start to help those. And then we're there as a constant, aid if they need it, trying to help them get going with that, to keep them in the field of preaching. I mean, because what good is it for us to train them to preach if they're only going to quit just a few years later because they can't be supported? And I think we all know that the truth of the matter is, if you've ever been on Facebook, you've probably been reached out to somebody from India or Africa looking for support, but it's hard to know whether you should support that person or not.
Yeah.
Right? Like, is this valid? Is this true? Is this real? What's their real need? Well, what if we could equip them where they didn't have to get out on Facebook and beg for funds? And so what we want to do, matter of fact, we think that's an awful model. So what if we could train them to do that in their villages? And then take it to the next step. What if they could do that with the rest of the congregation? Train the rest of the congregation to grow more food, take care of themselves. What if we could train them to use that as a source of evangelism, growing food that they could then use as, something that they could give to others, to help people in their villages, which would open the door for them to be able to preach the gospel to them. So that's kind of our model for our preaching schools. And that was originally our major mission and goal. And we've grown a lot since we started in 2010 with that mission. So we've started 3 preaching schools, one in Uganda, one in Tanzania, and we have one in Cameroon that's all on its own now. But which was the ultimate goal for each of these schools. But now we're doing a lot of working with congregations on a very personalized level in third world countries, trying to help them. And we're building a curriculum right now that is going to help them go from being like, for instance, a new church plant all the way up to being into what we would call the phase of replication, where they're going and planting new congregations.
Right.
A lot of congregations in third world countries don't feel like they're equipped to do that. A lot of them don't feel like they could ever have a full-time preacher. So what are you going to do? So we've got a curriculum. It's a year-long curriculum we're developing right now. And we're going to, for instance, in Nepal, we've got 100 congregations signed up for this spiritual growth program for the congregation.
That's awesome.
And what we want them to be able to do is go and figure out how to get elders and deacons from the Bible.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they don't have the resources that we have here in the United States. You go into any preacher's office or church library, you're going to find hundreds of books, a lot of aids and helps in English, but they don't have that there. So what we're trying to do is build a huge collection. We're going to have it on our website where they can go on there and they can get everything they need to help them get elders, deacons. What are they going to do about a preacher? This new congregation's been planted, say like Western Nepal, where we just planted several congregations. Well, how are they going to have a preacher? They don't even have enough money to feed themselves hardly. So what we're doing is we're training them how that if you've got 4 men, for example, because they don't have Sunday evening services or Wednesday evening services like we do traditionally here. What if you had 4 men, though, and each of them took 1 lesson per month? Well, they don't need a full-time preacher.
Right.
That's actually probably not the best thing for that congregation. They want to be American. So they see us in America like we are, and they want to be like us. But is that really the best thing for them? What if we could just train them where they did all the preaching? They did all the work. Well, if you've ever preached, you're the one that's growing the most when you're preaching, in my opinion.
Right.
So how good is that going to be for the congregation then if you get the men more engaged? Well, they're going to grow.
Right.
And we teach them how to do evangelism. Matter of fact, I'm working with Rob Whitaker, and we are getting all of the Back to the Bible and House to House School of Evangelism translated into every language where we're working.
Wow.
And then we're going to be training men to train others in how to do Back to the Bible evangelism. So there's this huge opportunity for us to go in and work with these congregations. They don't need handouts. They need a hand up. They need help to become the congregation that God wants them to be. And so that's a large portion of our work now is, sure, we're traditionally known as like this agricultural mission work, but in truth, that's actually become a very small portion of what we actually are doing.
So would you say that a big part of your goal is to get these congregations to be self-sufficient?
Absolutely. That's the whole goal.
Yeah.
Become an autonomous congregation that's completely self-reliant. For instance, there's a congregation in Kathmandu, Nepal, and it's the New Banishwar Church of Christ. And their elders, their preacher there decided, man, we're going to really make an effort to being this autonomous congregation, but we want to truly be the test for being autonomous would be then the ability to go out and replicate. And during the COVID years is when they decided to do this. So starting in 2020, they really put this effort out. Well, in the last 3 years, they've planted 9 congregations in Nepal, and they've done like this tremendous work. Well, it's not Americans doing it. It's this native indigenous group of people that are going out and doing the work. Well, shouldn't that be the whole goal, right? You go into the world and you preach the gospel to every creature, but then you're to teach and baptize them and then teach them to observe all things. Right. Well, one of those things is to be autonomous. One of those things is to be self-supported and self-governed in a sense, to be able to then go out and do the same thing. What if, we've been saying this for years, but someday Europe's experiencing this already, but there's going to be a day when they're going to be coming here. Yeah. It's just a matter of when. But what if we could get them equipped now, and get them growing, and it's not anything under an American thumb. There is no reason that churches in Africa, Asia, South America should be under the thumb of an American congregation. Because if they've got the Bible and they've got the resources, they can become the congregations that God wants them to be.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Caleb, what you got?
Well, and this may be one of the questions on here, but what's the history of this? Like, when did the Manna Project start? Who was behind it? How instrumental were you,
I started the
I
Manna
guess?
Project in 2010, and it was an accident.
Okay.
It was not anything like it is now, and it certainly was not in my pipeline of dreams. But so 2010, I was preaching for a congregation in Southeast Texas, and they were supporting a work in Kathmandu, Nepal, a preaching school. And the men of the congregation, we didn't have elders, were heavily behind it. And they said, "Man, you ought to go." And I said, "Well, I'd love to. I'd love to travel and love to teach. This would be great." So I was asked to go and teach at this preaching school that they had in Kathmandu. So while I'm there, the students every day would come up to me and they'd say, they really appreciate my class. Would I help support them? Because their families back home are starving. So my background is farming and ranching in western Oklahoma. We were pretty poor growing up. And we grew a lot of our own food. I mean, like vast majority of our food. We didn't go to the grocery store. My wife jokes that living where I lived was like stepping back in time 50 to 100 years. My grandmother, she had this giant pantry in her house that was just lined with jars. I don't know why you call it canned food, but it was jarred food.
Right.
Right. And, we grew beef, we grew chickens, and we had all that. And so the first thought that came to my mind when these students are asking me to support them so that they could feed their families because their families are starving is, why don't you grow a garden? Like that's this elementary thought.
Absolutely.
To me.
Yeah.
And they're like, "We don't know how." And I'm like, "How do you not know how?" Like, I've been around Kathmandu. There's gardens everywhere.
Yeah.
And a lot of them had lived in the inner city of Kathmandu for so long, and these other cities around Nepal, that they had lost the ability to know how to do that. That hadn't been passed on anymore. Okay. And so we started a class. I said, "Listen, I'll teach you guys how to grow a garden, how to raise chickens, how to raise rabbits, if you guys want, in the afternoons after school's over." So as soon as school was wound up at 4:00, instead of them all leaving, we stayed there, and I taught them how to raise a garden, taught them how to compost in Kathmandu. So, they're predominantly Hindu, so they worship the cow. Well, there's cows walking around the city just everywhere. So there's cow manure all over the streets. Yeah. And everywhere we go, I'm like, man, it's like perfect compost.
Free fertilizer. Yeah.
And so we don't even have soil here at the school. I'm like, well, let's build some. Yeah. Like, you can make soil? So we're walking down the street, Kathmandu, with buckets and old empty rice sacks with shovels, shoveling up cow manure off the street. People are looking at us like, these people are insane. Yeah. What's this white guy doing? Right. So, but we taught them how to make compost, how to make their own soil.
Yeah.
Went and bought them some rabbits, taught them how to feed the rabbits, care for the rabbits, breed the rabbits, butcher a rabbit, and eat the rabbit. So we bought some extra ones, and I cooked them for them, and they were like, "Wow, this is amazing. I didn't know you could eat rabbit." They're like, "It tastes like chicken." And, so, it was really cool. And so I came home and kind of had this burr in my seat about it. Like, man, somebody really ought to be helping. I wonder how many preachers are out there that don't know how to just feed their family. Yeah. And so at the congregation there, we had about an acre behind our house. We lived in the preacher's house, and I asked him, I said, "Can I use that to build like a little test farm so I could maybe do some teaching and show these guys some pictures and do some hands-on stuff?" And they're like, "Yeah." So we built what we called Little Nepal back there. I had this little test farm, and it was wildly successful. And we did a lot of teaching from that. Matter of fact, Texas A&M even came and visited one day. They'd heard about it. It was, really cool.
That's cool.
But we'd grown some really awesome stuff there. But so it kind of just built from there. And then the next year, congregation in Vidor, Texas, the elders invited me down one night to visit with them. And they're like, "Hey, we think you ought to do this full time." And I'm like, "Do what?" And, they're like, "Your mission work." And I'm like, "How is this going to work?" And they're like, "We're going to support you, and you're going to do it full time."
Wow.
And the next thing I know, we're moving to Vidor, and we started working in Haiti. We were working in Nepal, traveled to Cameroon a couple of times, and it just started growing. We brought Greg Knight on, and I believe it was 2014. and Greg was this huge addition.
Mm-hmm.
He just really boosted our work. We did a whole lot of work down in Haiti. In 2015, I had a man from here in the United States tell me about a preacher in Uganda that was wanting to build a preaching school. And we'd worked with some preaching schools previously, and one of our experiences was it's really hard to retrofit a preaching school to do this because you get stuck in your ways.
Right.
Well, and it's easier to take money from America than to be self-supporting. So we thought, man, it'd be awesome to build our own preaching school, but could we really do that? And I'm like, why not? You got the Bible. Why can't you teach? I went to preaching school. Why can't we teach? So we went over, looked, and found some land, bought the land. Within the next year, we had built a preaching school. It cost us less than $30,000 to build a preaching school. Like, we really were kind of out of the box thinking on it. We had 3 acres. We built a farm. And so we started school in 2016. And so in Uganda, that's our school. It's the Rwenzori School of Preaching. And it just kind of took off like wildfire. The next thing we know, we're getting requests from Cameroon to build a school up in the north west section. So we went and built a school there. Then immediately after getting it built and started, that school essentially we could not go back to because there was a civil war in Cameroon. So within the last year, though, we've been able to cut that school loose, and they're operating on their own now.
Oh, wow.
And then, so I think it was like 2019, we started a school. So in Tanzania, there's several schools of preaching, but and good ones, the Andrew Connolly School in the north and Chamala in the south. But we realized that there was nothing on the east coast of Africa there that was really focused in like the Muslim area, Africa. And a lot of people told us we were crazy, but, we're never going to stop, the violence of Islam with more violence. But we are going to stop it with the gospel.
Sure.
So
Amen.
we moved into a heavily Muslim zone, and we set up the Talawanda School of Preaching, and it's been extremely successful. Lee Wright and I spent some time. We wrote a series of correspondence courses that were just for Muslims. We couldn't find anything in our brotherhood that was just for Muslims, so we wrote one. I think to date it's about 1,000 people that have been converted using that. And that school is really working hard to becoming completely self-supporting, actually. And so Maurice Gasper is the director there. It's just an awesome school. Spent my wife and I, my children, we went in 2019 and lived in Chamala, helped the Chamala mission in southern Tanzania for about 6 months, worked there, helped them set up a farm and start working to be able to, it's a huge mission. They've got hundreds of kids that live on the mission in secondary and primary schools. So helping them learn to grow and raise their own food, and then working with the preaching school students that were there at the Chamala mission, training them as well. So that was a really cool experience we got to do. So we've really grown a lot since then and added a lot more workers. We hired Justin Hopkins, and he's now our director of academics. Greg Knight, he is our coordinator for Africa. We've hired Josh Robinson, and he is doing all of our multimedia. One of our big dreams is to put all of this into video, all of our teaching material into video, and then put it into every language in the world that we can, have it all on this huge database on our website. So we've hired him, and he does a lot of our PR work, going out and fundraising, giving reports to congregations. And then just in the last 2 months, we hired John McCormick in Texas, and he is working with us, and he is staff writer, helping us write curriculum.
Nice.
And so the work has just really, really, really grown.
Yeah.
A lot more than I ever thought.
And what is your website?
It's manafarm.org.
Manafarm.org.
Yeah, we'll put that.
MANNAFARM.org.
We'll put it in the show notes below. People can find it. That's awesome, man. It's kind of interesting. We've talked to several people about several different entities and different works and such. And even that, look at the network compared to y'all, we are tiny, right? But everybody has always said at the beginning, it grew into something that they never, thought it would. So it's neat to see how God uses something like this that you never would have thought. When you said you kind of stumbled into it, you had no idea what was about to happen,
Well, you never know what God, is preparing you for,
right? Through
his providence. I grew up, and so I was the youngest of 3 boys, and both my brothers drove tractors all day with my dad, and where they were helping, move cattle or whatever.
Sure.
Well, being the youngest, I was often left home with my mom or my grandma.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time in gardens.
Okay.
And I never, and taking care of the chickens and doing some things, like that back then I would gripe and grumble about.
Right.
Like, why am I doing this when my brothers could be out there driving those big tractors or,
Yeah.
riding four-wheelers, chasing cattle. And here I'm stuck at home
Yeah.
gardening.
Yeah.
And then next thing I know, my grandmother, she passed away a few years ago. She's a faithful member of the church. And one day I was at her house and she said, Gage, the Lord was preparing you for this.
That's
And
right.
I said, yeah, I know. I'd never thought it back then.
Right.
I think we've all got talents that we have to use to the glory
Yeah.
of God. And I just never thought gardening would be mine.
You earned your stripes, though, didn't you?
It's
That's awesome.
Well, how can our listeners support the Manna Project?
So there's several ways, of course, first, we need prayers, encouragement. It is not easy to go on mission trips. It sounds glorious, and I'm sure some people think that we're kind of like, I call them vacationaries.
Yeah.
So we're going over there and we're having this glorified vacation and calling it mission work. And it looks fun and it looks exciting, and sometimes it is, but it's also hard on us. So like we leave our families at home a lot.
Yeah.
That's hard. It's hard on our wives, hard on our kids. So we need prayers, encouragement in that, because it's a great work, but so are our families. So
Care
we have
packages with snacks and goodies, maybe?
Oh man, when we lived in Africa, we had some friends that would send us boxes of seasonings.
Oh yeah.
My kids, they loved it. One day a box came in and it was just like full of gummy bears.
That's awesome.
And that was everything.
Oh,
so that
yeah.
kind of stuff is awesome. But more than that, yeah, we need financial funds. I mean, it costs a lot to travel now.
Yeah.
So we need funding to travel, to operate, to maintain websites, to produce material and literature and pay salaries and operate our preaching schools. And then we provide them operating funds to go out and do evangelism. I mean, I know that within just the time frame of the mission work being going, we've had over at least 4,000 recorded baptisms,
Right.
So
That's
it
awesome.
costs a lot of money to go do that kind of evangelism, that kind of work. So every penny that we can get is so useful. And, so you can donate online
Right.
on our website at mannafarm.org/donate. And every person that works with the Manna Project, their funds are overseen by their local congregation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some links on our website that would, when you click on, like for instance, if you go to the About page and it tells you about each of our workers, they'll even have, most of us have a PayPal link.
Mm-hmm.
That funds will go to our congregation, and then they'll be able to use that to help support our work.
Yeah.
Or you can send checks to the Manna Project, and the information's there on our website for that as well.
Right. Do y'all put out print material like in print form, or is it all digital? Or
We do. We have both print and digital material.
Yeah.
So all of our supporters, every quarter we send out a big newsletter. We used to send it every month. We grew to a point that it's pretty cost prohibitive. So we send it out every quarter. But with bringing Josh Robinson on board, we have like every other day reports going out on our Facebook page,
Right.
and emails,
Right.
and so that's an Instagram, which is awesome, and video.
Yeah.
It's amazing video work. So that's been a real blessing. You can go to our webpage, and there's like, for instance, a magazine about the Manna Project. You can go in there and it's PDF. You can download it, print it off if you want to have that, and it tells all about the work we do.
Right.
But it's also in digital form. So
Sounds like you guys need a podcast.
Huh?
It sounds like you guys need a podcast.
Yeah,
I
there
need
you go.
somebody to do the podcast.
Yeah.
Congratulations, you guys.
There you go.
Yes.
You're hired.
I needed something else to do.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Well, Gage, you don't know much about being a man of many hats, do you?
No.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Well,
That's awesome.
we appreciate you. Appreciate
Yeah.
you telling us about the Manna Project. Any final thoughts, guys, before we wrap it up?
Super excited. So I didn't know much about the Manna Project. I'd heard of it, never really dove into it, but because I've gotten to know you a little bit, I think over the last year or so, just in talking, and this has been super eye opening for me.
Well, I had to be honest. I'm not a very good PR man. That's why you don't know much. But that's why Josh is
That's
on
right.
board with us.
Is that why you?
So
Is that why you got on to me for giving you your introduction earlier at the lectureship?
I'm not good at it.
You don't like lectureship introductions. Huh?
I don't like the spotlight being on me.
Yeah,
I hear that.
I hear that.
But I
too.
do love talking about the Word. So it's
Sure.
Right, for sure.
It's a blessing.
That's awesome.
Yes,
Well,
sir.
definitely prayers for you and
Yep.
for the Manna Project as y'all, continue doing all that you can for the Lord. So
Thank you.
Yep, that's right. We appreciate you, Gage, for being here and talking to us about the Manna Project, and for Caleb and myself as well. We appreciate our listeners also for tuning in to this episode of the Highlights Podcast. Make sure and tune in next time as we highlight another work in the Brotherhood.
And before we end, Gage is actually going to be episode number 1
Oh, nice.
of Did That Really
Yes.
Happen?
Yes.
Podcast that we
That's
love to
right.
air over the summer. It's just an 8-week podcast every year, but we have an opportunity to sit down with some guys who, especially you, having gone, in tons of mission work. I'm sure
Did that
you
really
have,
happen mission work?
I'm sure you have some
style.
crazy
Right.
stuff you can talk
That's some
about.
great stories.
So we'll be looking forward to that in the first week of June. Certainly excited for that. So
Sounds good.
all right, appreciate everybody. God bless.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode on the Scattered Abroad Network. We are grateful for your continued support as well as your continued prayers. If you would like to find out more about our network, please visit our website at scatteredabroad.org. We look forward to studying with you again soon. May God bless you.